Okay, so this is our debate on whether the bombs used to end the war in Japan were necessary. Okay. So I'm taking the con side, and I do not believe that they were necessary. The Hiroshima bomb killed 70,000 people, and Nagasaki's killed 39,000 people with the swoop of the bomb being dropped. I am not a proponent of using mass casualties as a deterrent to end the war. I don't, there always is collateral damage and people that are to die, but this bomb was specifically dropped to kill people, to get Japan to be out of the war.
The use of the nukes were used to make it so we don't have to invade the Japanese home island and have the war go out for longer and have more people killed. 100,000 people died by the Japanese, but it's better than that, than half of their population being forced to use sticks and charge at American soldiers with machine guns.
Well, all right. So we, like I said, we were already doing bombing in the European theater, carpet bombing, and on strategic sites and things like that. And these things were working. Okay, the same thing could have been done to Japan. Okay, there were military targets in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We could have continued to bomb those areas. Their supply chain with their railroads and things like that. We could have continued to bomb those things to make it to where the situation would have ended outside of the bomb. The bombs were nothing more than, they were designed to kill people. They were designed to kill people, okay? And that was the deterrent, what we were driving at to get Japan to be out of the war.
Like, if they were any other country that wasn't Japan, how they've operated since the Meiji Restoration, which was made Japan a Western power, try to modernize, surrender. They don't believe in surrender. You either die for your country or you win. There is no surrender.
But Japan was going to surrender.
They weren't.
They were talking about surrendering if they could keep their government in place. If
They
were fearful that the emperor was going to be killed.
The emperor isn't their government. They wanted to keep Toji, like people like that, the Japanese Navy and Army, the people that went into China and raped and murdered millions. They wanted a light American occupation for a couple years and then wanted us to leave. That's unacceptable. For us to leave people that attacked us just because we embargoed them for their aggressive expansion and murder of people. And they wanted us to just give them a slap on the wrist?
Well, I mean, first off, you don't think that if they surrendered and or decided to opt out of the war that things went back to normal?
What do you mean?
I mean,
if they surrendered, yes, things would probably go the same way as it did. But that's not how the Japanese operate.
They already talked about, like, we wanted unconditional surrender.
Yes.
Because that's what Roosevelt wanted. They said that the only way that this is going to work is unconditional surrender. Okay, so there was no negotiation around that.
Because the Japanese demands that they negotiated with us were ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
It was pretty much like if Hitler came to us saying, we'll end this war if you let me stay in power and I don't get charged for any of the war crimes I did. Or the war crimes we did will be looked at by German officials.
To me, you got to understand too. And you know what? All right, outside of Hitler was a different story.
The Japanese did horrible things.
And look, war is horrible. War is horrible. Even back to the Civil War, there were things done. War is horrible. Okay, I mean, just flat out. So things are done during wartime that are wrong. And that's why they have tribunals and things like that after the war to punish those people. There are, nothing good comes from war, okay? But the bombs, nothing good came from the bombs, okay? Other than ending the war, but what about like I said, the environmental aspect of it? A lot of things that were that the scientists knew about the bombs were not told to the government about the fallout, the devastation, the long-term effects, which they didn't know, but they had an idea. They knew that nuclear bombs cause cancer and all kinds of other things. Not to mention the environmental impact it had on the land. These were all things that were kept in the dark to the powers that be that said, okay, we're going to drop this bomb.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of agree with that the scientists wanted to test it. Because, I mean, you spent the whole war working on this and you want to see what it does. I mean, you've seen it. They didn't know as much as we do now. That's why, like, after the war, in the 60s, they were dropping nuclear bombs outside of Las Vegas for people to look at. They didn't know the long-term effects of radiation.
Sure.
They knew it existed. They didn't know what it could do. And the atomic bomb was a small bomb. It didn't give off as much radiation as, say, a hydrogen or a thermonuclear bomb.
No doubt. And that's, but I'm saying, like, from a scientist's perspective and then from a peacemaker's perspective, like the scientists, all the data that they've gotten from this, I think the scientists actually got what they wanted because of the lack of information that they gave to the government, okay? But, like I said, I'm a firm believer in too is that why do we have to drop the bomb? Okay, why do we have to drop it? Couldn't we have demonstrated? Because up to this point, Japan didn't know the capacity of the devastation that this bomb could do. They didn't know any of this. Okay, but if they were made aware of it or they were shown this,
a literal week before we dropped the bomb on Nagasaki, we dropped pamphlets saying, "Surrender, or we will use the most powerful weapon in the world."
Okay,
and they thought we were bullshitting.
Okay, well, you know what? That's like saying, okay, I've got this blaster ray that we got from aliens. That if you don't surrender,
there's a literal picture of it.
We're going to use. Okay, well, I'm saying there's other means. We had film. We had ways of showing them, but we didn't.
How?
I don't know.
We were in a state of war. How could we give them a film?
You don't think that if we sent something to the government showing them the power of this thing, they might have said, okay.
They would have thought we were bullshitting.
Are you allowed to say that?
Fine.
All I'm saying is that a pamphlet is not going to deter, is not going to truly show that you are going to die if this thing, not just you, but your family, and not to mention your cousin that lives 100 miles away, or however far out the radius is.
It was just the city, like the center of the city was the thing that damaged. It
So
wasn't that big of a blast.
It was big enough.
It was big enough.
And at that time too, like
that was massive.
You don't think that at the end of the I'm not sure how long it went out, but how many nuclear bombs did we have were produced?
But during when?
During the start of this, from Hiroshima up until
we had two.
We had two.
We used both of them.
Okay, so I read too that the government had in their budget for 30 or 35.
We were building more.
We were building more. Okay, so did they think that this was going to end? If we didn't get our point across with 2 bombs, maybe we're going to go back and give them 5 bombs.
We were going to drop a third one on Tokyo.
We were going to drop a third one on Tokyo. Okay, what's left?
Kyoto.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that the potential.
I think
did they
was
think
a bit unnecessary.
As much as we wanted the war to be over, don't you think if we dropped 2 and it didn't work, that we were going to drop more just to get this thing to end?
It's an ends to a mean. I mean, it's a bad ends to a mean, but
you
have to think.
It's a bad ends to the mean, but what I'm saying is that if the Japanese people and the government knew just the sheer devastation that maybe 1 bomb or 2, really, I think we could have got a point across maybe with 1 bomb, but no, we had to drop 2. I think that if the Japanese people and the Japanese government knew the devastation that this bomb would deliver, that would be a deterrent. Also, too, okay, again, with the Russians getting into the war, I think that was another thing too, is that Japan, I think, was already in the mindset that
They
if
were
Russia,
in no way in anything did they have the ability to invade Russia. They were not ready for that. In 1931, there was a border conflict between Russia and the USSR, and it ended with a Soviet victory. And after that, the Japanese said, "All right, look, a war between us two is not worth it." So throughout the entirety of World War II, there was no conflict between the Japanese and Soviets until the very end, when the Soviets were done in the West, and they're like, "Well, Japan's getting destroyed. Let's just take advantage of that." So they stormed in Manchuria, and then after the war, gave it to Communist China.
Right.
The only reason that the Soviets got involved in the war was because we were winning, and they wanted to take advantage of it.
Okay. So you're telling me that fear alone, knowing that
Because if the communists got to Japan, they would have shot and murdered the emperor.
okay,
But they know that the U.S. would be a lot more lenient with the emperor. They knew that the government would be completely reformed, but
okay,
they didn't know, but they hoped. They knew that the U.S. would be a better. They knew at least the emperor would survive the U.S.
Nobody knows. You're not going to know, but you have to weigh out the what you think the outcome. It's a gamble.
Okay,
It's a
the
bet.
Soviets declared war on the Japanese the same day that we dropped the first nuke.
Okay.
It was the same day.
Okay.
So if we
But
didn't,
Japan knew that this might be this was going to happen.
what?
That if Russia came
No,
in,
they had no idea.
they had no
They
idea.
didn't expect it.
So are you telling me that after we dropped the bombs and they surrendered, the only reason that they surrendered was because Russia was getting in the game?
Yep.
So the bombs had nothing to do with it.
They were a little bit of a contributing factor, but what everyone says is that the nukes were the ones that ended the war. It was the sheer terror that the Soviets would come in and put in a communist government in Japan, and they would have murdered the
Okay,
emperor.
I do not believe that the bombs did not have. I mean,
Most of the Japanese people didn't know, because radio. I mean, houses had radios, but no one really knew anything. No one even heard. Most of the Japanese people didn't even know what the emperor looked like or knew his voice.
So then, why did the government drop the bombs if they knew that did Russia? So Russia got into the
Russia had spies in the Manhattan Project. They knew that we were building the bomb,
okay.
and they knew. I'm guessing they knew when we were going to drop the bomb.
So
It's a fact that they had.
Okay, so you're
had
telling me
spies.
that the Russians were going to get into the war even if the bombs weren't dropped.
We don't know that.
Okay, so let's just say that. So if we don't know that, then there's a possibility that the bombs had nothing to do with it. Russians coming into this could have been a deterrent enough to sway the Japanese government to end the war. But and this will be the debate: is that did the bombs end it, or were the Russians? I don't. Again, I think that the fear, if the bombs did have anything to do with it, I think that showing the sheer force of these bombs in some way, if they were dropping pamphlets, why couldn't they drop film reels of the bomb blowing up, or get it to the government and say, listen, this is what's coming down the pike. You're not going to be able to
We would
prevent.
have, if we sent someone to give that to them, they would have arrested that guy, put him into a camp, and he probably would have died.
Listen, we have smarter people than that. Okay, they could have gotten that intel to the people, to the government.
The
to
people
say,
wouldn't listen.
well, the people aren't going to listen, but the government would looked at it and said that this thing is going to kill thousands of people. It's going to kill thousands of people. Okay, if you need to see more, it's coming. Okay, but this is what it's going to do. This isn't fake. Okay, seeing a
But
pamphlet.
you have to think. The Japanese literally used people to ram planes into aircraft carriers and ships.
Well-
They were all willing to give their lives up for their country.
But they did surrender.
Because the emperor did. The emperor told them to surrender.
Okay.
It was up to the emperor.
So what? So
if the emperor didn't say anything,
So the emperor's decision was basically based on the Russian involvement.
and the nukes, like there was a lot contributing to it.
Okay. So but you just got done saying that the bombs didn't have anything to do with it.
We don't know that. We know that the nukes were like 100,000 people. That's a lot killed.
No doubt.
But Japan didn't really have much in China. I mean, then you have to think, the Soviets didn't really have a navy, so there's no real way they could have gotten to Japan without our help. Let alone did they have anything in the sea up north in the Pacific.
Okay.
They had like scrap destroyers and maybe a couple submarines.
Well, if we were coming from one way, it doesn't. Well, that's in China.
They invaded through China.
I think that there were methods out there that we were doing in the European theater that were working to win the war.
Asia and Europe are two vastly different places. Most of Europe is flat, fertile farmland. Asia is bumpy, mountainous, jungle-filled pits of horror. Like Okinawa was horrible. Island hopping, there was a lot of bloodshed from Japanese, like foxholes. Like this goes back, the Japanese were the ones who taught the Vietnamese about jungle fighting and building underneath pits.
Right. Okay. Again, getting back to, I think that the Russian involvement in the war and just letting Japan know that we have this technology would have been a deterrent enough that the emperor, if that was the case, then the emperor wouldn't have cared. If surrender was not in the cards, then even after the bomb and all this, they wouldn't have surrendered. They would have let the entire country burn. But the
emperor, it's kind of, he wanted to live, and he knew if the Soviets got there, he wouldn't live.
So you're telling me that all this was the emperor didn't care about the people; he just cared about himself.
We don't know. We don't know what he was thinking.
Okay, well,
I mean, he survived the war.
So again, we have to think. I'm sure that the Americans and whoever knew that there had to be some sort of human characteristic with the emperor. That's you're put in place by the people. You're there for
No.
All right. Well, his surrender, I can't believe, was solely just on his survival. He had to have something for the people.
He probably thought at the end, like, it's not worth it anymore. There's no way we can win. What's his name? Yamamoto, who died during the war. He said, there is no possible way for us to win a conventional war against the United States. Pearl Harbor was supposed to knock out our entire fleet, and that didn't happen. It was supposed to knock out our fleet, our oil, and our aircraft carriers.
Yep.
They got none of those. Pretty much all of the ships that were sunk at Pearl Harbor were floated, refitted, and sent back out. Only 2 ships at Pearl Harbor were permanently sunk.
Aircraft carriers, right?
None of them were there.
Right. So it
it didn't destroy our oil.
I'm not saying that it was a it was a bad move on the Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor. It was a bad move. But the bottom line and what we're talking about is that the bombs.
Then you have to think, why didn't the Japanese surrender earlier? If we got that close, if we were in bombing distance of Japan.
Well, we didn't. We were already wreaking havoc on. We were already.
Then why didn't they surrender earlier?
Well, because maybe we didn't do enough. Maybe we didn't bomb enough areas or do enough.
Most of Japan was wood houses, and fire bombs.
But they're not bombing houses. They're bombing strategic. No, they weren't. They were bombing strategic
cities.
They bombed cities that were military installations, things that fed the war. They weren't just going out and bombing a mud hut or a stick.
They were aiming for cities that were of importance.
Right.
But bombing isn't that accurate. In one bomb, so pretty much all of Japan were wood houses, like wood flimsy houses. If one house catches on fire, the whole city's going. Like, look at pictures of Tokyo after the war. There wasn't much left. We completely rebuilt Japan.
Okay, well, I mean, you know, I mean, I'm not disputing the fact that at the time they were maybe a little, you know, crazy, okay, but I think that there were ways around.
You're right.
I
In a
think
perfect world, there were.
Right, and I think that there were war is hell and war is not good, but I think that some of the things that were in place were leading to their surrender anyway. I think that, I mean, there's so many things and that were going to happen. Would more lives have been cost? Yes. Okay, but I think that the unknown of the fallout of what environmentally the bombs are going to do to the area, what it could do to, okay, so after the war's done and people that are dying of cancer and the radiation that was left that impacted the people and their food source and their ability to live a normal life, we're not thought about.
Weren't like Chernobyl. It wasn't that far reaching into Japan. It was, they were isolated to just the cities, and within like months, the cities were the center of the bombs were able to go back in there. Like, you can see people right after the bomb.
What choice did they have? Well, what choice did they have? I mean, that was a major city. It was. I mean, there were people living there. Their lives were there. I mean, they didn't have Geiger counters. They had no choice. They went back in there. It's not like the government stepped up and said, "Okay, well, we've done all our research and everything. It's safe to go back." They just went back. The government didn't do any.
Well, they didn't know what.
Right.
No one did.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that there's intelligence out there to say,
Why,
listen,
yeah.
these things. This is what's going to happen. We could have put the fear of not God, but we could have put the fear of that. You know, Japan is going to basically be a parking lot if you don't surrender. If you don't,
the Japanese military knew that, and they.
I don't think they did. I don't think they. I don't think they knew enough about what the bomb's capabilities were to come up with a solution that would work. To say, okay, maybe we'll give in on this because we don't want this to happen. This is going to create a lot of problems.
I think you think that they know more about the bomb than they do. Then why else would we do tests for years after if we knew the long-reaching effects of the nuke? And why would we make bigger and bigger ones if that one was
that's
just
why I
good
felt
enough?
that that's why the government was kept in the dark about the bomb. I truly think that the scientists wanted to know about the long-term effects of this. I think there was and you're talking about military versus scientific, and the military is shock and awe, get it over with, and then surrender, and then their part is
the
done.
Manhattan Project was a military project.
Yeah,
it was overlooked by the military.
Right, but the scientists have their work is not done once the military part's done of it. The research on the aftermath and what is learned.
The only reason we were building an atomic bomb was because Einstein told FDR that the Germans were working on one. We didn't want them to get one first, which the Germans didn't. They gave up on it, saying that atomic research is Jew science. That it's just, which is ridiculous. Hitler believed that stuff like that, like the nukes would have been important for Germany. I mean, there was no way, any possible way that they would have.
It would have been a game changer.
It would have. But he saw that type of science as below German science, which is stupid. Which just shows to you how stupid the Nazis were.
Okay, I'm not debating. That's not the debate.
Yeah,
the debate is that.
But the only reason
could the war have been settled, okay, outside of using the bombs? And I think with
it could have, but it would have been for nothing.
But
if the surrender, Japanese came to us to surrender multiple times.
Jamie.
Yeah.
Real quick, Malecki, did you finish this?
Why is she doing this? Can you edit this?
Yes.
Trey, we're in the middle of this.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, what are we talking about? Nothing.
I thought you were going over.
No.
Alright.
You can edit that out?
Yeah.
All right. I feel that there were enough moves in place that the Japanese were eventually, and I don't believe that the lives.
So do you
and
think
all
the
these
war could
guys-
have ended sooner? How much sooner?
Who knows?
I don't.
But do I think that there were pieces in place to make this happen? Were there going to be more deaths after that? Probably. I don't think that it would have equaled the amount of lives that it was cost with the bomb. I think that once the Russians got into this, I think that was basically the nail in the coffin for Japan. That alone would have put put an end to the war. The bombs, I think that it was something that was shock and awe. We didn't need 2. We dropped 2. We could have probably gotten away with 1. We might have gotten away with none if we showed them, or maybe we did a test nearby in the ocean. Or I mean, I don't know. But somehow, if they would have seen the true devastation of what this technology could do to
You're saying,
them,
like, drop it outside of the city.
I'm saying drop or get or wherever. I don't know, but I'm just saying is that I'm sure there's a remote island somewhere that has nothing to do
Well,
with.
if we drop it there, who the hell's going to see it?
Well, they could see it. I mean, we had film. We had I mean,
We did film the atomic bomb.
We
but They
did.
didn't see that.
right. But if they did, if the government got wind or was able to see all the test footage of houses being blown to pieces and people sitting out there in picnics and being fried like a turkey, you know, you don't think that, okay, so life as we know it, okay, is going to be altered significantly if we don't do what they want. They have something that could ruin our lives. And if it's only 2, I mean, so how many do we need to get until Japan is basically a parking lot? Because we had more. If we have 2, we'll have 10, and then we'll have 50. Okay?
Mm.
So that's why I think that you know, we could have ended the war without the bombs.
Okay. But I keep bringing it back to the Japanese because they saw the emperor. The Shinto religion at that point was built around the emperor being gifted to them by God. And if the emperor was killed, say if in a bombing, or say if we dropped a bomb on Tokyo, shit would have gone crazy. They wouldn't have. It would have ruined a lot.
So
It would have thrown Japan into chaos.
So with the dropping of the bombs, were they pretty confident that they weren't going to kill the emperor?
Yes.
They were.
They didn't know that we were planning on dropping a third one on Tokyo, which is where the Imperial Palace was.
Okay, so, but that was in the game plan. So if we would have killed the emperor, it would have been just mass chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But we were going to do it anyway. So that really wasn't a.
Well, it was planned. We don't know if they would have.
Okay.
So it's all hypothetical at this point.
Right. All this is hypothetical.
Yeah.
We don't know what the outcome of the war would have been if we didn't drop the bombs.
We just know what has happened.
Right. All we can do is theorize on what was in place and what was happening before, and what happened. You know, if we did or we didn't, and that's what this discussion is about. Is that enough?
Yeah.
All right. You want to add in on this, hon?